ضيوفنا الكرام، رحبوا معنا كوشال شاه، رئيس الإعلام الرقمي في آسيا والشرق الأوسط بشركة رولاند بيرجر من الإمارات العربية المتحدة ومتحدثي هذه الجلسة.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Kushal Shah, Head of Digital at Roland Berger in Asia and Middle East, and his panel.
Sabah al-Khair. Good morning, everybody. So this panel is about disruption. And I believe most of you have gone through disruption in your lives. So I'd like to spend 1 minute describing disruption. Imagine yourself when you were 10 years old at school, and there was a naughty boy or a naughty girl in class disrupting the class. What happened? Your parents probably told you, don't spend time with that disruptor. He's gonna make it bad for you. And you had to decide whether those naughty boys were good or bad. They're the ones who create the first disruptions in our life. And we're gonna have a panel here that describes how to choose the good and the bad. After that, after the fight for change, imagine your big brother or your young brother. The big brother is always the one fighting with the parents to allow the change to happen, to create the reason for change. And the young brother enjoys it, or the young sister enjoys the benefit of that. So where is the future going to come from? And this panel is going to get into this debate. The future disruptors are going to be young, are going to be more empathetic, and are going to be more female. So that's where we're going to start from. I'd like to welcome the panel, and I'd like to start with Paris. So Paris, as a quick introduction, is chairman of the Applied Innovation Institute. He's a professor at the IE Business School, and he also runs the Venture Lab. So as part of your introduction, please also teach us how to cope with disruption.
Thank you. Salam alaikum. So, disruption. If you're going to be a disruptor, and I know the title here is Be a Disruptor and Not Be Disrupted, you need to embrace uncertainty, and we heard that earlier. But think about yourselves, especially the young people. Do you feel the same way about uncertainty in your personal life as you do in your professional life? Probably not. But you know, we never think about that, but you can actually separate your relationship with uncertainty in your personal life than in your professional life. Take, for example, the late Steve Jobs. He hated uncertainty in his personal life, but embraced it professionally. What does an entrepreneur see in uncertainty? He sees opportunity. So the reality is that we've done a lot of research over the last 6 years, and we've seen that you can actually separate the two, and you can actually teach people to embrace uncertainty in their professional life, even if they remain fairly introverted in their personal lives. And we all know that school education is training us for a predictable world, so we're not ready for this disruption. Now, if we can learn to embrace uncertainty professionally, that's great. And the other thing we've seen is that there's a direct relationship between embracing uncertainty and emotional intelligence. So you can actually teach people emotional intelligence at work. And that has enormous ramifications because I think, as we're going to discuss in a few minutes, much of innovation today is based on the user experience. And that demands a level of empathy that a lot of workers don't have today. So if you can teach people emotional intelligence at work, you're going to teach people to become much more disruptive. And the other thing it's going to do is allow us to work better with AI, as also will come up. Because the only way for humans to actually compete with AI is through our emotional intelligence. Because that's where they've met their match. There are very few computers today that can do that. So I'd like to start this by throwing that out, this discussion today, in terms of this is what it takes to be a disruptor, but what does it mean to disrupt?
So Paris, thank you for that. Birgitte brings in all the players in disruption, because in disruption you've got yourself, but you've got policymakers, you've got the government, etc. So Birgitte, she's the CEO of the Big Innovation Center in London. She was a professor of economics, being both an entrepreneur and an academic, but now she's out here to to hopefully bring some of that into this space.
Yeah, out here to disrupt, clearly. So I'm CEO of the Big Innovation Center, an open innovation professional services company in London, working across businesses and policymakers. And what I want to say about, I just hear your last question also, what does it mean to be disruptor? So that means clearly that you are disrupting everything. If you talk about the entrepreneurship world, you are disrupting markets, you're disrupting existing business models of what good looks like in your industry, you're disrupting the way transactions are done, even the attitude to property rights, whether it is data or IP. You can be disrupting ethical issues and protocols and standards. So you disrupt everything. And that, of course, means that if you have no vision, then you are exactly that kind of antisocial person you mentioned at the beginning. But if you have a strong vision, your disruption can be extremely useful and extremely helpful and help societies and businesses to progress. So of course, also, we have discussed a lot in the previous sessions on the new technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain and Internet of Things and robotics coming in to be disrupting. But when we talk about disruption in the business world, it's not just about the science and technological change and, and engineering change. It's really the business model change, it's business leadership change. And I think to be very successful, you really need to get it all right. So what we do in the Big Innovation Center, when we are enabling a productive disruption, or what we call creative disruption, this is really, we are making sure that the new business models are developing and emerging in sync with government policy and regulation, because if they're out in sync, they really, it's very difficult to disrupt, and everybody will be losing out. And particularly now when everything is moving so fast, in the early internet revolution, we had kind of policy and regulation catching up. Now, of course, we can't have that because everything happens so fast. So policy and regulation needs to be disrupted in sync with business models, but to bring these models together, so business models and policy is implemented together, takes, of course, some kind of convening power and research and open innovation across the organizations. That's exactly what we do.
Thank you, Birgitte. Before we entered, the organizers disrupted us at the back. When you're normally on a big stage, there's nice seats at the back, you sit comfortably. There's a disco going on at the back with blue lights. So when we came in, we're already quite straddled. So that's a good way of introducing James. When James was young, he won a scholarship in Singapore. And when you win a scholarship, you have to work for the government for many years. He was bonded. So he had to disrupt the bond. He had to go out and change the world. So can you describe the past there?
So Assalamu alaikum, a pleasure to be here. My name is James, and I'm an investor, entrepreneur, father, husband. And to your point about disrupting, I had, I think fate smiled at me, and I was able to get the help from my partner, who's currently director at MIT Media Lab in Boston. We started a venture fund together, and he bust me out of my bondage with the Singapore government. Since coming back from the US and working since 2006, I've been on all sides of the table as policymaker at Infocom Authority of Singapore, Infocom Development Authority of Singapore, postal regulator, telecom regulator, industry developer, champion of the ICT industry. I've been an investor, doing a venture fund for technology, early stage seed funds. I've been an entrepreneur, exited my company to Grab. I'm now building another one, fintech company in Indo-Pacific. When you think about disruption and you think about what it means to people today, be it young or old, I think there are several dimensions from which you can look at the problem, right? I think you can look at it from disruption or being disrupted from the invest or buy versus the build, right? You can look at it from whether you're the upstart or whether you're the incumbent. And you can look at it from the tribe you're from, the company and the tribe that you're part of or you form, versus the self, and how you relate to that. As an investor, when you're looking at, especially for earlier stages of financing, the analogy I would give when you're trying to spot disruption is akin to like a paddler, a surfer paddling out, seeking that earlier wave that has yet to crest, right? And there's always that person surfing further ahead of the pack, looking for what's happening, what's to come. But more important than that, you need to know how to crest that wave, how to invest in that intersection of design, hardware and software, how to combine capital, networks, and experience, and more importantly, timing, right? As an entrepreneur, as a creator of product services, organizations, I think your leverage point is different. Your leverage point is how you can take ideas and plans, and when you infuse them with fast and agile execution, and turn ideas into reality. It really depends on your ability to balance your founding team. How many of you are entrepreneurs or are thinking of being entrepreneurs here? That's a good number, right? I think you have to take care to balance your co-founders. I've seen a lot of unbalanced co-founding teams, and very rarely do you have a single founder succeed in this world. Because it's an extremely lonely and tiring journey, right? And you have to have the charisma and the leadership to convince good colleagues to join you and work for you. You have to convince investors, instill trust and confidence such that they'll put money into you. You have to convince customers why they should part their money and give to you. All of these are not simple and call upon, I think a lot of the previous panels had covered all the complexities and EQ, PQ needed. I think another panelist and I was discussing last night, Penny and I and Sumugi earlier, and we were talking about, and we had our own baby Misk at dinner last night, because across 3 generations, right, across different backgrounds, and the same points kept coming up, I think.
So one of the things with disruption is it's stressful, even for those who are disrupting. When you're working hard, and you've had a long day, either because you've been doing baby Misk or something else, you want to go home. You want to go home to the big mommy or the big daddy and get some comfort. So when we talk about Nasser Al-Nasser, who we're going to introduce in a second, he's basically the big daddy of the industry. His industry is disrupted. It's disrupting. He's employing probably the 3rd biggest employer in the country. So tell us how STC is playing this role.
Okay, thank you, Kushal. Thank also to Misk for this great opportunity. I've been around 20 years in the industry, and since I joined the industry at the advent of the GSM, I have seen many disruptions. Previously, the voice and SMS used to be the cash cows of the telecom operator, and we did not have to worry about anything. There is a huge return on the employed capital. Life is so rosy. With time, as time went by, there is another challenge, which is the data. So we have to transform ourselves because we have been disrupted. The expectation of the internet to go to mobile, and this happened in the mid-2000s, around 2005, 2006, with the advent of the 3G. This is another wave. Then 4G came out. So this is also another thing that we have to adapt. The challenge and the opportunity with telecom operator is as much together. There is a huge challenge, but there is a huge opportunity. If you look today, one of the challenges is that the OTT is eating up the digital native company. If we talk about Facebook, if we talk about Google's, etc., is eating part of the pie of the telecom operator, which made the telecom operator business model cannot sustain the way it was. But the opportunity that mobile operator has, the customer relation, has the, what it takes from technology, has the advantage of the network so that they can offer a superior quality of service. And with this in mind, I see the challenge is becoming an opportunity that they can venture into new adjacency. We in STC, we are looking beyond a traditional. Our DARE strategy is looking completely in new adjacencies, whether in the financial services or fintech, IT services, content services, platform, whether IoT platform, security platform, analytics platform, etc. Another dimension for the telecom operator, they are expected to enable other industry. Other verticals have to be enabled. If we look at the promise of the IoT, more than 50 billion devices are expected to be around by 2025. In 6 or 7 years from now, more than 50 billion devices. This is multiples, around 7 or 8 times multiple of the human connections as we have it today. And this, most of it will come to the industrial, to enablement of health, of education, of transport, of all industry verticals. So it is an opportunity for telecom operator to play a central role in the enablement of Industry Revolution 4.0. This is from one perspective. The second perspective, I believe there is also another opportunity, which is the technology advancement. Today, if you look at the IoT, if you look at the 5G technology, where you can slice the network into applications, this is also another opportunity. You have the mobile edge computing, so if you put this opportunity with everything being censored through this infinite number of censored, with the cloud services where everything being servicized and complemented by artificial intelligence and analytics, you have the perfect story for going and taking the other industry in a futuristic way and disruptive way.
It's a bit scary because next year, probably at Misk, there will be a robot sitting here and we don't know what will be on the side. So what advice can we give to the youth that are basically here to see how do we invest in our future, how do we support the growth of this country and the kingdom, and also, you know, we've got people from Asia, Europe, Africa. How do we take this forward? What advice, maybe starting with Paris, do you give?
Okay, well, I see a lot of disruptors out there because there's an amazing vision that the kingdom has over the next few years to become a truly innovative country. And from what I can see, the young people, and especially the women, you guys are going to be the big disruptors. Shukran. I always say that the women in the Middle East are the best kept secret because once it is unleashed, the force will be very difficult to stop. So what does it take to be a disruptor? Well, as I said earlier, you need to really force yourself out of your comfort zone. And the beauty of looking at disruption purely from a professional side is that it really is ironic. But you know, a lot of people think that to be disruptive, you also have to disrupt your personal side. We've done research and we found that after interviewing about 7,000 people, we found that 80% of the people who are truly disruptive, who are truly entrepreneurial, who are truly innovators, they're introverts in their personal lives. They don't like uncertainty in their personal life. Now, it makes sense though, because what do people look for in their personal life? They look for balance. So what I'd like to encourage you all is your personal life is great. Don't let anybody judge you. You live your personal life as you want to live it, especially if you're happy. But we all need to embrace uncertainty professionally. We all need to get out of our comfort zone because the new technologies that are going to be out there very soon are going to make it in such a way that the only way we're going to be able to differentiate ourselves is by truly being disruptive and embracing things like empathy at work. Empathy with our customers. I mean, just look at Amazon, and maybe that'll be a good way to start the discussion here. Amazon is a company that embraces uncertainty every day. It's not about customer satisfaction. It's about obsession with the customer. I've been talking to a lot of companies here in the kingdom, and essentially, and I think STC is definitely one of the leaders in this, they need to embrace their customers like never before because the business models are so disruptive that the only way that you're going to be able to succeed as a company in the future is if you develop real relationships with your customers. So
the change that we're seeing, and you've seen it in your own country, in your own kingdom, the change in the last 2 years is substantial. When we walked in here at 9:15, we walked through the back and we felt, oh, we're in the ladies' corner when we went that way. But when I look now, it's all mixed up. So even in the last 1 hour, the change is already starting to happen. So perhaps...
Yeah. Okay, so just to kick out a little debate here. You're absolutely correct and right that when we are, that the kind of Amazon, we can take Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Alibaba, all these major companies, they're clearly embracing their customers, and this is a great thing, and we love their innovations, but there is another thing, and that is that while they're growing global market share, although we see more incubators and accelerators and co-working spaces, their market share actually is in decline compared to the tech giants. And I think here we need to think about, innovation and competition in the long run. So where some of them were very cool in the beginning, things are starting to change a little bit. And this all comes down to data governance. And what I think, if I was the youth here and everywhere in the world, I would think about Creative Commons. I would think about how we could think about governing our data in new ways. So now we own our data, and then we opt in to the companies to share the data with each company one by one by one by one. And then, of course, with amazing analytics, they can give us amazing things which we all want. But if we want, and this is fine in the short run, but if we want long-run competition, we need to have these data which we give out to go into more like a Creative Commons environment in which startups and scale-ups and entrepreneurs and university academics can actually be using to innovate in new things and to bring out new companies. Because one thing is very important, that is that the tech giants are, of course, extremely important, but the supply chain is also very, very important. And if we want to innovate in the supply chain, we need access to the data. So I would say if I was if I was youth, which I hope I'm still kind of trying to be, I really want to embrace the Creative Commons and data sharing and the data revolution.
So given we're talking about data sharing and the youth, Nasser, I'm sure you have strong views on how to protect and the security of that data, and also how cool are the kids you're hiring from now?
Well, respecting the security, because it's very close to my heart, and the security challenge, I believe with what we have seen today is the tip of the iceberg from the security perspective. If we are going to 50 billion devices and that have access to almost everything in your life, so how to protect such investment? Today, cybersecurity crime is costing the global economy around $575 billion with the size of the security today. So imagine when everything is censored, when everything is connected. What's this gonna be? We believe in investing in the youth. I believe one of the great assets we have in this country is the youth. I'm echoing the Crown Prince what he said. This is the most important national asset. We have created Inspire You, which is an incubator that already 18 startups have been initiated by youth in the college and immediately after the college. More than 100,000 part-timer and full-timer have been employed by that has been graduated by startups that has been graduated from our Inspire You incubation. So this is by itself, funds of more than 35 million riyal have been raised by this startups that graduated from it. We teach them the business cases, we take them to the Silicon Valley and the like, we help them, we give them the infrastructure to support, and we believe that it is paying back to the country and to the company. We have established STC Academy. And STC Academy, it's the one of a kind as a digital academy. What we have done so far, we have multiple partnerships. We have graduated more than 1,200 graduates in coordination with Misk and Udacity. We have run a cybercraft program for the college people. More than 50 has been graduated so far. We have a digital leadership program that we are incurring. We want this to be the digital anchor for the knowledge and for driving the digital culture and digital knowledge among the country. So this is really taking a huge part. It should reflect on the company, yet it should reflect also on the company at large on the region.
So bringing inspiration to the youth, we have James who has built pretty much a Demicon using data. So the same data that we're trying to protect is built a Demicon. Can you tell us about how to build such companies?
Well, data is the new oil. I think in having both, I think is going to be awesome. I think that so 2 points. I think Bridget's point about Creative Commons. My mentor partner is Joy Ito, as I said earlier. He's previously the CEO of Creative Commons. And so when you mentioned that, I was like, oh, that's up my alley, right? Copy left, not copyright. The whole point of the air, the water being a commons and how data does not degrade as you use more and more of it. But ultimately, to Nasser's point about informed consent, customer privacy, I think regulators are here to regulate use, not regulate access. Likewise, consumers are here to decide if the service provider is worthy of their data, right? I think going forward, that's always going to be the case. And in our minds, there's no better data to use than the data on your phone that you grant us permissions to, the apps we request you to continue using, that we use to underwrite your credit score for real-time loans disbursement underwriting. And be it normal loans with interest or Sharia loans where it's fees, right? Structured accordingly. I think the underlying premise is the same. And then going back to another point earlier that Paris made, we all actually agreed to try and create a bit of edginess in the panel. And I think he made some good points, but I also think you made some points about how, as part of being happy and disrupting, I want to take a counterpoint to that, saying it's actually that there's a certain amount of cognitive dissonance that you need to go through when you are acting as the disruptor. And when you're disrupting people, disrupting companies, you yourself run the risk of being disrupted, because it's no longer the bell curve, right? It's about the shark fin these days. As an individual or as a company, you need to be able to decide how to create more and more of these opportunities and decide how do you do that, right? And I think I'll try and give some maxims. So I believed in the flow plus filter plus action equals, impact kind of equation. I think flow, a person or a company with no flow will have no opportunities, right? Just right there. If you have flow, but you have no filter, then you're just busy with no meaningful outcomes, or you just can't commit to opportunities that's coming up your way. And if you have flow, you have filter, but no action, then you got no execution, no follow-through, and you can't get shit done, right? And no impact. And when you have all three aligned, the stars aligned, that's when you have outcomes. Other things that I want to part with, there's a lot of talk about education. I think education is what people do to you. Learning is what you do for yourself. And we're in a world where compasses are much more important than maps. We're in a world where push is more important than pull. Pull is more important than push. And how can an individual or company navigate this disruptive times and remain happy, and yet remain relevant and not lose grip of all these regenerative things, I think is key. Yeah.
So we have 3 minutes. What I'd like to do is, before we open the floor for questions, just one last comment. We are competing against the big tech out there, whether it's the Amazons or the Googles or the YouTubes, etc., the Netflixes. And in the end, the kingdom must also generate something against this. We're not going to be about, the future is not just oil, the future is the disruption that comes from here. What are your views, Nasser, on protecting the environment?
Well, it's very important to protect the IPs and the SMEs, startups, etc. And when it comes to an international giants coming to the country. So the legislation and the regulation has to play a great role in this one. Yet I believe at the same time that even if international giants come to the country, part of the value chain will be supported by SMEs, etc. And if we see today in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, there is a new unit called local content. And this local content unit is stipulating how much of international giants' investment in the country has to go through a local content, whether from SMEs, whether from hiring, whether from manufacturing, whether from production, etc. So it is a legislative, and the country is already taking step to ensure that they don't crush the local industry versus the international giants.
So I believe there must be quite a few local content entrepreneurs in the audience. We do want to give a chance for some questions, so if there's anybody that has a burning question, please address it.
Here's one.
Number one.
There's a lady over there. We don't have time.
My name is Hassan Azair. I am retired from SABIC. So most likely, maybe my question or comments is also retired. My question to the gentleman from the US. He was overwhelmed by certainty and uncertainty. Maybe he was hypnotized by that. During my career, I never thought about certainty or uncertainty because Professor Periwak always told me the only certain thing about the future is uncertainty. So what do you think for the new entrepreneurs, a new generation? Do you think scenario planning is practical approach to help them for the future success, that they have more than one scenario and each scenario has control variables where they could switch from one scenario to another if there is a need because of the uncertainty? And please, don't worry about the future. It is always uncertain. Thank you very much.
So it sounds like he hasn't retired from SABIC yet.
Never, never.
Paris, what do you say?
Thank you for your question. I totally agree with you. We have had uncertainty always. And, you know, I come from the baby boomer generation. Most people here are not from that generation. I see most of you are millennials. What's interesting is that millennials, in their personal lives, seek more certainty than even my generation. Because the world is so uncertain that the only anchor of stability that one has is the personal life. So my advice in terms of your question, if I understood it correctly, is you need to embrace your values. You need to keep your culture. You should be proud of your culture, your religion, everything, because that's what makes you strong as a country, as an area of the world. But I think at the same time, you need to completely embrace uncertainty professionally. And as soon as you can understand that the two of them are compatible, you can have a Silicon Valley mentality without being a Hollywood person. As soon as you realize that those two things are compatible, then you're able to develop yourself professionally. And this is not just at the individual level, but at a company level. You know, we believe this is the foundation of innovation. And as we heard earlier from some of the panelists, you know, this is the uncertainty, the embracing uncertainty that drives the creation of all these startups that we're seeing today.
So we'll leave time for one more question, maybe number 3.
Thank you, all the cheers, my wonderful cheers. I'm Jane Lu from China, and I have a question to Mr. Altris. Maybe I pronounce it wrong, but an American Mr. Altris. Sorry. I heard a sentence from you, and you said the Arabian ladies here are a hidden fortune, like discovered secret or something, and I want to know more about it. Why would you say so? And I also have an example from China, and we know that there's a company called Alibaba, and it's the Chinese Amazon. 3 days ago, they sold like, 3 days ago is the Black Friday of China, and they have the online shopping. 21 seconds later, after they opened the shopping, like more than $1 billion US dollars were dealt on the online shopping. Just like.
Are you asking a question or are you making a comment?
Question. I have an example for the question, so I'll finish very soon. Yeah, and for the $1 billion US dollars, more than 70% of the money was run by ladies, by Chinese ladies, because Chinese lady loves to money.
So maybe we'll paraphrase your question. We have to protect.
Yeah. The question is that why would the sir said that the Arabian ladies is a hidden fortune, and what is the market? What is the future for the?
So I think we will just quickly answer that. Maybe Nasser. the local content and the local, the ability to consume locally and produce locally that you're creating the supporting infrastructure for. Maybe you can give us 1 minute about that.
Well, one of the initiatives that we have taken as a company is we call it STV, which is a venture fund. And this one, we are investing $500 million in this one. And it will be going around all the non-conventional area, whether it is in the fintech, e-health, robotics, artificial intelligence, etc. We have already gone some investments that will see the light soon. Some investments have seen already the lights. In the content, we are concluding a deal in the coming months. So with this, we are putting the ecosystem that makes it conducive to make sure that the local we can not only have a local content, we can export the local content at the regional level. And this is the objective of that venture fund, which we call STV.
Very good. Birgitte, last comment.
If I could just quickly comment here as well. One of the major things for building local capacity is, of course, that we have what we call like an enterprising government. And I think that the vision for 2030 is very much around that, because it's about building the technology supply chain, the science supply chain, the skills supply chains, the investment supply chains, the physical and digital infrastructure supply chains, and etc. And all these supply chains are really, really very important to have locally. So that capacity building will reduce a lot of uncertainty, and it will create a very, very healthy economy. There's one more thing in relationship to this. We have not talked about government. We have talked a lot about industry. Clearly, government is a big part of any economy, and they will be innovating too. All the government services like identity management, tax and internal revenue, land register, student loans, all these things will also need to go on blockchain and go through data analytics and be services that will be delivered in a much more productive way. And it's very important that we understand that government has to go through that type of technological revolution as alongside industry, because we are all going to transit to the next generation.
So thank you very much, and I leave you with one statistic. 7 years ago, from a tech perspective, there were less than 20 companies being built in Saudi Arabia, less than 20. This year, 2018, they're close to 1,000. We expect in 2 years there'll be 10,000. I think everybody sitting here has to at least create one company here. So thank you very much. Thank you.